record? Yes, it's recording.
It's recording. I can start right now, right?
Yeah.
As no.
As you know, we earthquake in Kahramanmaraş, in beautiful country in Turkey. No one expected this earthquake. A great disaster ensued. Tens of thousands people are died. No one could have predicted this one day before. This shocked us all. We didn't know what to do. Still, I doubt we know. I am. If your country was such a station, how would you prepare? I am so excited. My heart.
So first of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm of course sad to have heard and witnessed on the television, of course, and internet, what has happened in south of Turkey. Of course, I'm old enough to remember the previous earthquakes. There was one in the southern tip of Istanbul a few years back on the Asian side, and there was, of course, many others. Unfortunately, this is life, nature. It's sometimes cruel for the people in Mediterranean. I'm originally Italian. All across the Mediterranean, we are regularly victims of earthquakes. Of course, in Turkey, in Greece, in Italy. I remember the earthquakes in the 1980s in Napoli. In 2008 was, I think, Aquila. And it's always, first of all, a disaster because you lose life, you lose people that are dead. This is, of course, tragic for the families. It's also tragic for the country, of course, economy in a sense, but it's a shock for infrastructure that you need to rebuild. It's difficult for people who don't have house anymore. It's difficult also for people who survive. Because maybe you lost someone in your family. Also, maybe you lose your job because there's no more business to do. There's no more activity. And also, so you have a mix of disasters that add when there is such a natural disaster. And for example, you can have short-term problems. In this case, it is winter. And people internationally don't know, but winter in Turkey can be very cold. And suddenly you have no house. Maybe you have no clothes because everything was in the house, and so you have a personal disaster for maybe family and friends that are dead and or injured, and you find yourself outside with the cold. And where do you find food? Where do you find clean water? Where do you find all of this? Is short-term problems, and then of course long-term problem is where do you live? How you build a place to live again. And sometimes it can be problems for many years. It's not just something that happens in 5 minutes and then it's over. No, unfortunately, it's a long time. And of course, the first reaction for many people is to think the government, the state, can help us. And we know how it is always difficult for the government to help the people, because how can you be everywhere at the same time? How can you help everyone in a big country? Turkey is a big country. By the way, I know Turkey very well. I worked in Istanbul. For the last 10 years, I go on holiday every year in Turgut Reis near Bodrum. In the November, I always go 1 month every year in Turkey. So I know the country. I've of course mostly in Istanbul for business. It's a beautiful country. I've been almost everywhere, to Konya in the center, Izmir, Bodrum, of course, Istanbul. Just the I've not been in the east, in the Black Sea and the mountains in the east. Next time, maybe. I want to go to Göbekli Tepe in the south to see archaeology. I know the country really well, and I love the people. I love the culture. I love the food, and you have the best coffee in the world. So, as an Italian who likes coffee, I really like when I come to Turkey. Unfortunately, so excuse if I do a little bit of smile in these tragic times. But by the way, it is also important to keep a good face and good sense of humor and good, look at the future with a smile. And the first thing I want to say to the Turkish people who listen to us is to say, despite the tragic event, you have to have courage and look at the future, and you have to be in a way positive and think of how you can rebuild your life. It's difficult for the victims. It's difficult for people who have family over there. I have friends in Istanbul. Fortunately, of course, no one was there or has family who was hit. And then to answer your question, how would you do it? Well, it's, you cannot compare countries, because in Switzerland we don't have the problems of earthquakes, except in one city, in Basel. We have other problems. And of course, the country is not the same size. We are 9 million people. Turkey is much bigger, of course.
Yeah.
And so there is, what the government can do is different from one country to another. But I want to say to the people who listen to us, government is good if it helps you. It's very important. And first of all, you pay taxes, so it's good if they help you.
Yeah.
But my job and what I write in my books is more how you can help yourself by preparing, first of all. And also, I'm very happy that you have it. I'm very happy that it is translated in Turkish and it's available. However, so preparing for something like this is important, but also what do you do during and what do you do after is also important. So Switzerland would not be a relevant example as far as governments do, and I'm sure you have governments in Turkey who did very good things, and I'm sure you also find that there were things he was not able to do, because how it's very difficult to prepare for things like this, and it's very difficult to help everyone. It's such a big disaster. I think you have now 50,000 people who are dead. If I hear in total, which is a big amount of people, and it's very tragic. Children, women, young, old. It's a tragic cultural and physical disaster, of course.
Even the animals are dead.
Of course, yeah. And so to give you an idea of the process that in the preparedness instinct, people who plan for these kind of things, natural disasters is a big part of what can happen. And I think the first step for everyone, whether you are poor or rich, old and young, woman, man, doesn't matter. You have to think, where do you live? And what is the risk where you live? Maybe you live in a place where a tsunami is a problem. Maybe you live in a place where a volcano is a problem or a risk. Maybe you live in a place where earthquake, in this case, is a risk. And I think all of Turkey has this risk. Maybe you are in a place where the risk of war. Now, fortunately, this is not the big risk in Turkey, but you have had phases of terrorism. So how do you deal with terrorist attacks? This is something that happens, unfortunately, a few times a year, and unfortunately now less than in the past. I remember there was much more of this in Turkey. And of course, you have to think of economic crisis as well. As how do you prepare for this? How do you prepare if you don't have a job? All of these things fit together, but if you specifically go on the earthquake problem, there's really three categories of things you have to think. First of all is before. What can you do before, unfortunately, something like this happens? You cannot, it's very difficult to predict exactly when it's going to happen, how strong it's going to be, how long it will last. So you have to think so you have to use the mind to do the projection in the future to say, if something happens, what can I do? And of course, you can learn from experience from other people who had to go through this. And we have many experiences. You have it in Turkey, there is in Japan, there is in San Francisco, in America, in Los Angeles. There's a lot of places where people have had experience on what to do. And you can learn and prepare if it happens, and you hope it never happens again. You hope it doesn't, but we know that unfortunately in some places it happens regularly. So I felt when I was working in California, in San Francisco, sometimes I did feel the shake of the earth, because there were many very small earthquakes. In this case, you had a very, very big one. The images are impressive, and of course the preparation in your mind and in the physical preparation tells you what to do if it happens, what you need to have with you. We talked about the winter. If you have to go outside, are you in a pajama, barefoot? Or can you grab next to your door a little bag which has a little bit of money, maybe a lamp, maybe some clothes for everyone in the family? For example, this is something that is very common in places where something can happen in the middle of the night, or even during the day. What if you're in the office and your house is destroyed and you cannot go back? What do you have? What it is that you have with you? So of course the first priority is to save life, is to save your life, of your family where you are, or the people around you if something happens. And the second priority is to help people who are injured, or help them out of, in this case, of buildings who are crashed. And it's not easy. It's not something that you can do simply, because we know that I am sure most of the people unfortunately died from not the first 2 minutes, but they died because they were crushed, and then they died from the cut, the smashing. It's a very tragic and painful, of course, death, or because they are trapped and they cannot get out, and after a while there's no water, and eventually after 3-4 days you die. And I know people in California, in San Francisco, who always have in every room of the house a little bottle of water, because they think if I get I cannot get out and the house crashes, maybe I'm close to a little bottle of water and I can survive 2-3 more days with a little bit of water. But certainly helping people, if you get someone out and he has a big cut in the arm or in the leg, are you able to, and do you know what to do? Do you know how to make stop the bleeding? Do you know how, before even the help comes? Because as you've seen in a big city, the help, how can they help everyone at the same time? It's impossible. You don't have fire people, doctors, ambulances for everyone. It's impossible. These people are very courageous, and they do, I'm sure a lot of people are very tired after working many days and days and days, but they cannot do everything. So it is also for this that you need to try to help as much as possible. I'm sure that in Turkey you have also, like we do in Switzerland, when you learn to drive, you have to go in a lesson to learn how to help people for accidents. It's very basic, but it's something. I let you if you want to add something here.
We experienced the earthquake and survived. What about later, according to philosophy of survival? And what should we start doing to save our family, relatives, and friends?
So yes, so what you have to plan for after, for example, is if once the event, the catastrophe is finished, and you have saved some people, maybe not everyone. Your problems are different, but they're still very serious problems. First of all is the problem of the bodies. And therefore, if you have, unfortunately, dead people and decomposing people, you will have problems with water. If it rains, they will carry bacteria into the water when maybe the water is broken. And so it's very, very dangerous to drink water from the area. You have to be very careful with that. So having the process to purify and have clean water which is what usually the government or the people who help, they bring. I'm sure you've seen the images, big trucks with water bringing so the people can have clean water, because you can die very fast if you have bad water. You can have very bad illness very quickly. So especially for children, it's very dangerous, especially for babies. So obviously, making sure you can access or purify water is very important. So, for example, having in your bag, or in a place in or outside your house, some water purification tablets, for example, and this is like a concern that you will have in the first day. The second moment will be, of course, the bodies, and first of all, the dead that were outside of the crashed buildings. You have to make sure to have the proper disposal, the proper safety regarding the rot and the decomposition. And of course, the culture in a Muslim culture like in Turkey, you also have to do it pretty fast, which is a good habit. And of course, this is difficult because you don't have the time to grieve. And humans are not just about survival. There's a lot of emotions in people. And when you have your children, your wife, your brother who are dead, and you have to take care, and you cannot really do the proper burial. You cannot do the ceremony. You cannot have the religious rites. You have to do fast, and you cannot do everything that you think is normal. This is also very difficult emotionally, and yet you have to do it. So you have to organize yourself. So you need people, and maybe everyone who's listening to us can be that person who is the leader, and he says, okay, we understand it's difficult, but we absolutely need to move the bodies into outside of the town, away from the water, and we need to organize to do it with whatever transportation, whatever means. And then you have to look at the people under the of course. So we're talking after the event, when there is no chance to find alive people. Then you have to think, how can we remove the rubble to take away the people who are dead inside, because they will also create problems. You mentioned animals. I've heard stories in Italy. Also, there was a big earthquake in the 1980s in Yerevan, or was it 90? In Yerevan in Armenia, and there was a very big problems with dogs. The dogs are alone, and after a while, they're hungry, and what do? They dig and they try to find. And this is a problem, because they can spread illness. And also, in every culture in the world, you don't want dogs to eat the people or any people in fact. So these kind of problems have to be thought, and dogs, but also cats. So, okay, this is maybe not the first priority, but certainly you have to think about how you organize. And for individuals, of course, having a little bag with a little bit of food, maybe, so especially clean water, tablets to purify the water, maybe some lamps with batteries and electricity. Not just for the night, but if you have to go inside the building and take someone out, you need the light. Knowledge about how to treat people who have injuries, and also something we learn in for sure. I learned this from the school in Switzerland, was that the first thing is you don't want to make an accident worse. So you want to make sure that if you have to go back into a building to help someone, you don't want people to come and if they're not useful, if they're not absolutely necessary, just make sure people don't go in also, because you don't want to have an extra accident. You don't want to have a second problem. You want to make sure that to put the people who are outside in a safe place. You don't want to have, because maybe the earthquake comes again, a second time or a third time. This happens often. So you have to be very careful. And of course, the climate. So the good thing in the winter is that, the bodies of people, they don't go bad very fast. If it was in the summer, you don't have the problem of the cold, but you have the problem of the heat and the water. So you always have to take into account the environment you're in at that moment.
Selahattin is leaving Istanbul. We I don't say, but we expected Istanbul earthquake, and transportation will be very difficult. What we do about this? Asia and Thrace area is very very hard transportation if we leave this tragedy.
Yes, of course. The a big city like Istanbul, one of the biggest cities in the world, would be, of course, would have a lot of problems if an earthquake happens. And it, as we know, history, it did happen many times in Istanbul, even before, during a long time ago when it was Constantinople. There were many times, and Byzantium, there were many times earthquakes. And the difference is, at the time there was not, what is Istanbul today? 15 million people. It's a big city.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more than 15 million.
So it's really a lot. And so the question, of course, in a big city, is that the help from the government, Gendarmeria and the fire people and the army, yes, it does exist, but it's such, you cannot have ambulances for 15 million people. It's impossible. And also the hospitals can be crushed by the earthquake or the catastrophe. And of course, then the electricity may not work necessarily. The water supply may not work necessarily. So all these problems multiply with people. And one thing you have, at least as an advantage in Turkey, I think, is that at least you have a sense of nation, a sense of brotherhood in the country still that exists. It's not the same in Western Europe anymore. So that you feel that you need to help each other. It's not selfish individualism. And also, in Turkey, most of Turkey is Turkish people. So it's a very big advantage because you are brothers, you help each other. And of course, you have always the problem of criminality everywhere in the world. Of course, you have sometimes people who take advantage of catastrophe for doing bad things. So you have to be careful about this. But I think Turkey is less of problems for this than other places. Like in America, when there was a catastrophe in New Orleans, very quickly people were going in the shops and stealing, hurting people, doing bad things. I hope this doesn't happen, of course. But you have to be prepared as a man or as a person. You protect your family, you protect your people, you protect the area, of course. And of course, you have to think also long-term about the economy. This is what my first book that is translated in Turkey talks about, is what if the economy goes into a very, very bad time because of this catastrophe touching very key elements of the country. This happened in Japan a few times when suddenly you had earthquake destroying big parts of very important cities. Like in 1923, there was a big economic crash after that. And so it is also for this that you need to prepare long term. So, I said you need to prepare before, you need to know what to do during, and then you need to think about what you're going to do after. Do you still have a house? Do you still have a job? Do you still have all? And so the more you go long term, of course, the more you can reorganize, but you have to think about how you can be, of course, as self-sufficient as possible. So Istanbul being such a big city, if I was to be the manager for the security in case of earthquake or natural catastrophe, it's a difficult job, because so obviously you would dispatch training first of all and equipment to every police and gendarmeria and the fire station in all the cities, and have them to have, I'm sure they do have very good training to go and help people fast, to have systems that you can use the phone, if it works, to call the people who are at home. As we know, it's different if the earthquake happens during the day than it happens during the night. Usually there's less dead when it's during the day because people are not at home sleeping. A lot of people are outside or they're ready to go outside if they feel something. If you're sleeping, by the time you wake up, by the time you realize what's happening, it's already maybe 10, 20 seconds into the problem, and maybe you don't have time to go out. So there is disadvantage. The disadvantage during the day is that all the electricity and sometimes gas for cooking is on. And therefore, if there is problems and the pipes break, electricity can make short circuits, and then you have more problems with fire during the day. So all of these things are, for the rescue people, for the police, for the fire, they have to think about these scenarios. And this is something you do in training, of course.
Yeah. If you want, ask any question, Emre or Selahattin, please help me.
Question. For example, for the situation of big city metropolis like Istanbul, it will be very hard, as you already stated that. There is a landlord in Turkey that is very famous, and you can say like Trump of Turkey, even though Trump is much smarter and much patriotic for his country. I think a few years ago he stated that the constructions in Istanbul were constructed with the, like, for example, the sand from the beaches and such cheap metals for a construction, for a building. So he stated that in such a disaster, such a catastrophe, it would be like something impossible to go to Istanbul, that even the army cannot go there and cannot rescue people. And in such situation, I believe that that's a very big threat to the national security of the country. But for example, we are not trained in the aspect of civil defense, not in the army, not in the schools. So this is a big lack for us. And personally, there are no how can I say that? There are like no courses to go and educate yourself for such disaster, especially for the earthquake, or for example, survival after that.
Well, two things. On the courses, well, there you go. You have an opportunity for business to create courses for the people to teach basic reaction attitudes and thinking what to do. Also to help to train first responder help, how you treat contusion, cut, bone breaking, limb cut. All of these things we can learn, asphyxia, or to secure the people so that they can be taken care by a real doctor after. This is something we can learn. On the construction side, unfortunately, I know what you talk about, and it happens in many countries, not just Mediterranean, believe me, also in the north, that you have some people who are not 100% honest, and they have problems with construction, and it's a very old problem. This is something that you see already, in Hammurabi Code in thousands of years ago. You already have in the law, there's death punishment for architects who build houses that crash. So the justice system, of course, needs to put the laws, but also needs to prosecute and judge the people who are dishonest. And because of that, people die. This is fundamental in every country. And I think this should be a political question. Of course, it's not me to say because I'm not Turkish for Turkey, but it is something that people should, of course, be concerned, because sometimes, look, I know how it is. You want your house to be less expensive, so you want to work with the people who do it less expensive, and they do with less quality. And in the end, when something like this happens, maybe you die. So unfortunately, you have to take responsibility to check and ask and want your house to be built in a good quality. And it's difficult because some people lie, some people are dishonest, and people, they say, no, look, this is the best sand. It's sand not from the beach, but it's sand from the earth, from the real sand quarry, like it should be. And they took the sand from the beach, which is round and it's not good for cement, and because it's cheaper, and then you have a problem, and cement of less quality, and the construction which are not on the standards. You have cheap iron inside the concrete. There's many ways you can save money in building a building, and of course this is what you should expect the government to enforce: norms, standards of construction. And we had exactly the same problem in Italy. I remember in 1986 there was a big earthquake in Napoli, I think it was 86, and it was the same problem. A lot of houses just fell down like sand, and they discovered that it was the construction who was bad quality, and yeah, many people died because of this. So yeah, it's of course it's a problem, of course.
Selahattin, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Is there a personal advice about for people who are waiting or expecting an earthquake or another devastating experience like this, for how to both prevent those injuries and how to move on after that?
So the first question, as I said earlier before, the first question you have to ask, it's a difficult question, is why do you want to live in a place where there is earthquake risk? It's a question. And the answer for 99% of the people is, I have a family, I have a job, and this is the land of my father and my grandfather and my grandmother and so on and so on. So you don't want to move, and I understand that. But it's a question you have to ask. Do I want to live in an earthquake place? The answer for other catastrophes is the same. People who live near volcano, people who live near tsunami area, people who live in a place where there is every year fire and that can destroy and burn the house. It is a question. Then, of course, as I said, you need to have this the alert system. And for earthquake is very difficult because it can happen very sudden, very fast, and it's not like there is seismographer. They will because the earthquake starts always small and then becomes big, but it can start small and stop. So if you give the alert every time there is a little start, then you have alert every day, and you cannot live like this. So unfortunately, you have to expect. And I remember when I lived through some very small earthquake, suddenly everyone stops because you can feel and then it stops. But if it would become big, like everything would start to shake, then you need to know what to do. And experience shows that it's better outside. If you cannot go outside, the doors are usually more solid because the structure. And if you cannot, then there is furniture and tables and places you have to hide, hoping that the building doesn't crash on you. It's you try to do as best, but you can learn a little bit about this. And again, as I said, having water in the house, having a little bag at the exit of the house that you can take and run away. And sometimes it's not that simple, because, for example, last year my girlfriend, she was back in Russia in a small house in the forest, and she has the bag with clothes and everything, of course, like everyone. But the house, during the night, the house was burning, and she ran away from the window because the house was everything was burning. So unfortunately, no one died, but she went out and she didn't have the bag. The bag was at the entrance. And so she was in a pajama in the winter outside. So it's a problem. So you see, even if you prepare, and this is why your question, the second part of your question, is also very interesting. Even if you prepare, maybe you find out that the preparation was not useful and it was too late. and it didn't help, and now you're alone or with your family or with some people outside or inside the house that is crushed, and what do you do? And the most important element, and this is something I'm writing in my next book, but it's also in the very first book that you have in Turkey, is the mind, is the survival attitude. And the good news is most people, they have instinct, and good instinct helps. Is you must not panic. You have to think. You have to think, okay, what do I need? Water. So for example, if you are stuck in the house and you have one bottle of water, you keep it to drink. You don't use it to wash. See what the difference. So you have priority, and your mind needs to make you priority first. Secure secure the environment and help the people that I can help. Then is make sure that we have the elements we need to survive, and to think little steps. You don't think, oh, one day I will be outside again. You have to think, okay, to be outside again, first, I need to get out of this problem immediately now. Yes or no. If I can, good. If I cannot, then I need to do a smaller problem. My first priority is to find water, for example. Or the first priority is to get away from this place that is about to crush. So I need to move to a place where I have place to breathe. Before even water, you need oxygen. So you have to think baby steps, little steps for survival. Even people who are going through big survival problems in the mountains, in the forest, in difficult, or in the war, they don't think about, oh, I will win the war in 2 years. No, they have to think the next day, the next hour, the next 5 minutes. What do I need to do to get out of this building, to call help for people? So for example, in Switzerland, they teach us if you are caught by avalanche, so the snow who comes down and maybe covers you if you're outside, or covers your house. It happens, not often, but it happens. For example, this is something that maybe people will think it's funny, but it's useful, is you have to pee on yourself. Because the dogs, they smell your urine, and they will find you easier. They will smell where you are more easily. For example, this is a small silly trick in case you're inside the building or crushed under the snow in the mountain. This is something they teach us. Of course, there is technology. If you have a phone, maybe you can work, but again, is the network running? Because maybe there's no electricity. When I travel, for example, of course I have my phone, but I also have a satellite phone with me. Of course, crushed into a building, it's not useful because you cannot have access to the sky. But when I travel, in case there is a big problem, I can phone with my satellite phone. Otherwise, you have whistles. You can use a whistle to make noise. Put it inside your bag, that your little survival bag that you take to go away. And but the truth is that these events are so sudden. Even if you're prepared, if you have the right mindset, it can catch you really bad. And it is not something, what I write about survival is to help people prepare and think about how they can react better. But the truth is, every time something happens, whether it's a car accident or a catastrophe, or your house with a fire, or economic problem, usually you are surprised. Usually you are even, of course, for example, an accident, if you are not surprised, you don't do the accident. So unless someone falls into you, but then it's a surprise. You're not expecting someone to have a car accident with you. So every time you are surprised, and so adrenaline kicks in, and this is where having a bit of training, having a bit of knowledge on what to do and how to react mentally is fundamental. The mind is, we say, is 60 to 70% of everything in survival. Then is the skills, and then the tools to do what you need to do. But the mind, the attitude, not to despair, not to be without hope, this is important to train, and it's difficult because you know, if you have your child who dies in front of you in a catastrophe, how do you react? Can you react cold and think, okay, how can I save the others? How can I get out? Or are you completely destroyed and you start to cry and you become hysterical, and it's understandable, but this is not what helps you. So the mind is something you need to train, absolutely. And I would say not just for this, in everything in life.
What kind social preparation should we make before the earthquake?
That's a very good question. So yeah, sorry, very good question, because you know, we tend in the modern world to be a bit selfish and individual and alone, and we're busy. We forget that we need neighbors, and we need to know our neighbors. We need to know who they are, what they do, the skills they have, and you know, have a good party, have coffee, and spend time with neighbors, of course, family, but also neighbors. And one thing that can be organized, and I would do this in every city, every area of Turkey, is to have people, citizens, who meet and to say, what if there is earthquakes? What can we do? And someone says, okay, I can do this. I'm a doctor. Or another one says, I am nothing, but I have a big stair and I have tools in my garage where we can come and climb and break stones. And another one says, I work in the city, but where I work, there is a truck with something to break the stones, you know, to break the you check the skills, and people will say, okay, if there is an earthquake, you know, you find out everyone is in the street scared, and then you say, oh, Mustafa, oh, Aziz, let's help each other, because we know. And you can do trainings. You can do, for example, here in Switzerland, I'm sure you have the same in Turkey. We have the first Wednesday or Tuesday, first Wednesday of every February, every year, and then also August. So twice a year, we have a test of all the alarms. So all the alarms in the city, in the villages, they sound. And these alarms are a test, of course, to see if they work in case there is, I don't know, nuclear war or something very bad happening. So we test that. And so people, of course, like in Turkey, we go to the army training when we're young. And so we learn a little bit of skills on how you help people, how you organize, of course. And so you can do that in the village. You can do that in an area of the city. In the street, you can say, this is the street, I don't know, Mustafa Kemal Street. Everyone, once every 2 months, we meet and we organize what to do in case there is fire, what to do in case there is earthquake, what to do. And then we go and have coffee and have a little raki and have a good meat all together, a good breakfast or dinner all together. Maybe even in the street, everyone brings something. This is very important to create knowledge and help. And I think it can save lives, yes.
What is philosophy of practical sense survive? Now, what path should we follow as rebuild life after the earthquake, and what we do?
The philosophy that I try to put in my books, first of all, it has to be practical. It has to be something you can do. But I think also there is something about freedom. The more you are able to help yourself in difficult times, in difficult situations, the more you can help others, the less you are dependent of help from outside. And this is freedom. If you are independent, you are free. Of course, you can still be part of the nation, you can still be part of groups of friends, but you're a free person. And that is very important. And, you know, in Europe, we have forgotten this. in Europe, we're all like the Soviet Union was to be. I don't want to do politics, but it's a philosophy question. Everyone got used to be waiting for the government to help. You lose your job, governments give you money. You are ill, you go to the hospital, government pays you. Of course, they tax you for this a lot, but everyone is waiting for other people to help. You have a burglar, you wait for the police. You have a fire, you wait for the fire people. Okay, but maybe you could do something to make sure the fire doesn't happen. Maybe you can stop the fire. If there is a burglar, maybe you can stop the burglar or make him go away by dissuasion or by yourself. You don't need to always wait for others, because then you are in an attitude over children. And children, as we know, they're not free. They're not independent. They need parents. So we are adults. We are men and women, adults. We want to be free. And therefore, we need to prepare. We need to be as efficient in independence as possible. And this is, of course, what I write in my books is, what if there is a crisis? Yes. Then it's important to be able to help yourself and help others. But you can push this philosophy in every moment in the life. You don't really need people to help you all the time. You can do it alone. And so I always show in the books, for example, of course, I deal more about economic problems, economic crises. Having independence means having autonomy. And autonomy means, are you able to get your own clean water? Are you able to have your own electricity? Are you able to have your own food? Not 100%, but a little bit. I know that it's still very common in Turkey, maybe not in Istanbul, in the big city, but it's still common to have little gardens with vegetables, tomatoes, some trees with some fruit. You have at least food, and water is, of course, concerned because you are used to have hot and dry summers. So you have the tradition of having cisternas, big places you can store water, under the houses, in the mountains, so that you can have water all year. This is of course a tradition. You also have, by the way, you are a pretty advanced country in terms of using solar energy to heat the water. For sure, everyone has this heating on the roof for water, and more there is photovoltaic production for electricity. Electricity is important, but not so important, in fact. But certainly food and water you need. And clearly the health, what to do in case you have an accident or if you're ill, to be able to rely on yourself and on your knowledge. And yes, after a while, a doctor, but at the beginning, you know what to do for yourself. And, a long time ago, the grandmothers and our grandfathers, they did a lot of this. And we need to learn again to do it a bit. Because as we know, the economic and the world today is a dangerous place again. Economic is so-so. You've seen in Turkey in the last 4 years, it's very difficult. And of course, the international situation is very dangerous. We could have a big war anytime. So we have to think to be ready for difficult times. And we can do it with a smile. We can do having good times with our friends, of course. But we have to work and we have to prepare to be, as you imply with your question, the more independent as possible.
Any question? Emre, Selahattin?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
How did you find out about my book in Turkish?
It is very good, and I love this book. I saw you in Vark Vikernes on YouTube with you. Your conversation is very good. He is great artist and musician.
Yes.
And he is also a survivalist, I think.
Yes.
I saw this book with Turkish version. It is surprised me, but I buy this immediately, and I love this book very really. I recommend this everyone because this is very important. Our country,
Okay, I'm very happy. So make sure everyone in Turkey knows about it. It's a good book. I like. I honestly think I have it in many languages, of course, and I was very happy that it was translated. Ceres Publishing, that it was translated into Turkish language. And of course, if you know forums of people in survival forums, mention the books. I'm sure they will learn about it, and I hope it helps Turkish people to prepare.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Teşekkürler.
Teşekkürler.
Thanks so much. And it was really good for us to have a conversation with you. And we learned a lot. Emre advised me your book, but I haven't read it yet, but I will definitely read it.
Maybe we organize a conference in Istanbul. I go in Istanbul. It's very easy to go. I go often, so it's easy to organize a conference so we can talk to people, and we can do that.
That would be
Thank you very much.
Good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.